going on, guys? Junior's Fishing Company with a little nymph today. Now, I don't tie a ton of like super crazy bright baits or anything like that, but I've tied up a couple of these little nymphs in this pattern and I really like it. So I've got a size 12 Hanak 290 BL, these competition hooks. BL, I'm assuming it might stand for barbless because this is a barbless hook, so I'm assuming the BL is just for barbless. I've tied a couple of these though with Daiichi 1180s. These are just standard dry fly hooks, but I really like them. They're really thin hooks, but I don't really need some super like 2x strong hook when I'm fishing for bluegill or you know, even crappie and stuff like that. So I really don't care about a super thin hook. I mean, you can bend these hooks out pretty easily, and so you do have to be a little bit careful, but I'm really not too worried about it. So this is I actually squeezed, this is a 5/32 inch fire hole tungsten bead in lightning bug, and I don't have a ton of non-slotted beads just because I've gotten so into tying a lot of jig patterns. And this is Danvilles 6/0. I'm guessing it's some sort of Chartreuse or something like that. I'm going to do a biot tail, and so I'm just going to build up just a little bit of kind of a little ball here. It's going to help push those biots apart, but it's also just going to be kind of a little, if you want to call it a hot spot or anything like that. But I'm going to put some biots down here. These are just hairline goose biots in fluorescent yellow. Again, you can see where this bait is going. This is not going to be a subtle bait. Super bright biot tails, or this is going to be a super bright tail. I don't want these overly long. I'm going to trim them now just a little, even before I measure them. This is a long shank. It doesn't say that it's like it just says standard, so it's kind of a long shank though, and I don't really want it to be too long, so I'm just gonna put those on. I'm gonna kind of put them on my side, just give the old pinch wrap and just get that on, and I want them to be relatively centered, so I'll just kind of go like that. And they don't have to be perfect. After a couple fish anyway, they're gonna end up getting all wonky on you anyway, so they don't have to be perfect. You just want to make sure that they're at least centered a little bit. I'm going to wrap this all the way up just to kind of keep my body as even as I can. I'm going to be wrapping some vinyl ribbing on here, and so I just want, I'm going to bring those biots up as far as they'll let me. They're starting to bend back a little bit, and I'll just bring those all the way up, and I can kind of just trim them pretty much to my lead. That lead isn't necessarily for weight. This 5/32 is going to be plenty heavy on, 3-pound test is what I'll be fishing this with. It's really, this bead was a little bit too big for the eye of the hook, so I ended up just putting the bead on and putting a little super glue in there and then jamming the lead wire in and pushing it back just a little bit so that eye stays open. I don't need a ton of space for that eye. Just to, again, I'm going to use 3 or 4 pound fluorocarbon on something like this, which is just hair thin. So I don't need a ton of room, but that's going to kind of help me with just making sure that that bead, once I put some pressure on here, that it doesn't end up pushing over, because then your bait is pretty much useless. So I've got some vinyl rib. This is mid-size, just in green. This came in a pack of just like a plastic pack. I bought a bunch of these spools on Amazon. I got like 20 of them for like $4 or something, and I just write the little whatever it is on there. I have a bunch of these, and that way I can put them on. Right behind this camera, I've got just a couple big thread holders, and that's what, so that it didn't come on this little wood thing. So I've got my vinyl right here. not really going to trim it or anything. I just want to get it on there. And I'm actually going to end up putting a little bit of tinsel under this. So I'm going to put my vinyl on first. Just want to kind of be careful. I don't want to mess with those legs too much. I've got just some holographic olive or something like that. This didn't come on a spool. I've said it many times. I've just got a couple bags of tinsel that I just have taken from old musky baits and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna, I want to make sure that both of these, when I start wrapping, are gonna be right by my biot. That looks pretty good. And then I'm gonna come back up here and I'll just wrap this all the way up with some good pressure. The 6/0 isn't, you know, it's not 200 tendonier, but I want to make sure that that's down. And then this is totally up to you how big you want this body to be. I've got a couple other ones that I can show you at the end. This is the 4th one I think I've tied, but it's really totally up to you on how thick you want this body to be. I don't want it to be overly big. I would almost rather have it be on the thin side. So really all I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple wraps down here, back and forth, really just to even out this body, because that vinyl rib that I tied down added some bulk to that, to the bottom of this bait. And so I'm just going to kind of wrap down. I don't even know if I'm going to end up wrapping all the way down. And then I'm just going to come back up, and whenever you think it's even enough, I'm just going to come to about where I'll probably end up bringing that vinyl to. So the first one I'm going to do is this tinsel, and I just want to make sure I'm putting some good pressure on there. I don't need, if there's a little gap and you can see thread or anything like that, this stuff is so flat you don't have to worry, and it's flashy enough where if there's a couple small gaps, you're really not going to worry about it. This just helps add a little bit. That green is kind of a dull green, and I don't know if they make Chartreuse vinyl rib. I've only got maybe half a dozen vinyl rib colors, so really I was just kind of at the whim of what I had, and I wanted to tie a bright bait. So now I'll take my vinyl. I'm just going to wet my fingers because it squeaks. And I know you don't want to hear that. I'm going to put really good pressure on here, and it's messing with my tail a little bit, but that'll be alright. I'm just going to do spiral wraps all the way up, really tight, and as I get closer to the front, I can loosen those up, and it'll help add just a little bit of body to this. I'm not going to put down any resin or anything on there, and I'm going to go a little bit farther than I think I'm going to need to, just because you can always wrap back on it. You can't add more when you get to the end. Then I can just come in here and trim this off. So the front of this, it's going to have a little bit of a flashy wing case, almost kind of like the Higa's SOS's eye tie. I don't use floss, I use tinsel. So it kind of reminds me of that. I've got this is just Mirage tinsel. I'm using the large because I tied one with medium and it just wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. So I just want to tie this large in right on top. Just going to kind of push it right onto my bead. Just loose wrap, just get that down. And then I'm going to bring this back as centered as I can. This is usually one of the more difficult parts, and it just seems so easy, but it's so easy to get it just a millimeter off, maybe not even. And really, that's for you to decide how picky you're going to want to be. I doubt the fish are going to be that picky, so maybe I'll come just a little bit farther back. I'm pulling on this pretty good because I do want a little bit of a body on this. So I'll just come back up here and I'll just kind of get that out of my way. Now I'm going to put some peacock hurl on here. I have some chartreuse, or it's like caddis grain peacock hurl, but it really wasn't quite what I wanted. So I actually ended up just using a standard peacock, and right by the eye, you can kind of see right here and up here, there are some spots where it's just really, really flashy green. So that's where I trim these off, because I do want, again, this is a really bright bait. Sometimes the peacock hurl can be a little bit dull, and so I was intentional about what kind of hurl I took from the stem or whatever, and I'm going to bring that all the way back to there, and I can come back down here, and now I'm going to wrap this up. So I've got 2 on here. I'm going to wrap this up, and you want to make sure that the quill, or whatever the bottom part of this is, I can't remember, you want that to face your bead or your eye when you're wrapping, just so it's not pushing down on itself. So I'm going to get just right up to my bead. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this up. I'm just going to kind of wrap that, and I'm going to tie this off on the bottom of my bait. And what that's going to do, you'll see in a second, I wanted a little bit more peacock on there, so I'm going to keep that on, but I don't want it to get in my way while I'm putting down some of my legs. So my legs are going to be, this is just Nature Spirit Partridge in caddis green. So I just love Partridge. Partridge is a great, there's a reason it's so popular. It's just awesome. So this has a bunch of different little feathers in it. Some of them are more black than others, some of them almost look grizzly, and some are pretty much pure chartreuse. I'm just going to call it chartreuse for convenience. And this has just a little bit of black in it. That black, it might even show up more in the camera. These are going to be my legs. So I'm going to come right up here, and I want to make sure that the stem of this feather is right in the middle, and then I can kind of just give one little wrap, and I'm just going to kind of tweak this feather. I'm going to end up just doing this. So I want that feather, I want it to listen. These are going to look really long right now, but I'm going to end up pulling them off, or up, not off. I want them to stay on. So I'll kind of just do that. And I want this, again, this is just a little, this should be an easy step, but for me, I don't know, for anyone else, just to get it perfectly centered, because when you rotate that thread, it wants to rotate, the materials want to rotate with it. And I've always just found that for me, I'm going to take one wrap off, I'm going to pull these feathers, be careful, maybe that's a little too tight still. You don't want your stem to break, but you don't want to pull too fast, otherwise it's just going to slide out, and that's not detrimental, you just redo it. But I don't know how long I really want these to be. The other ones I did were really, really short. Not short, but they were pretty thin, so I kind of want these to be a little bit bulkier. So I'm just going to kind of pull this side down. Again, I want them to be pretty on the side, so I'll put a little pressure on there. I'm just going to hold this while I put that pressure, because I don't want this to rotate down. And maybe 3 or 4 wraps should be good. I can kind of still just tweak it a little bit, and I can come in here with some of my fine scissors and just trim that off. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because I'm going to end up wrapping more of my peacock hurl on there. So now I've got this peacock hurl on the bottom, and I'm going to take it and I'm just going to do a couple more wraps. It's really short and brittle, so I'm just going to use my rotary to get that, and I can kind of see I still have plenty. So I'm going to get one more wrap there, and then I can kind of tie this off. It's going to kind of hide all that stuff that I've got sitting up there, and then I can just come in and trim this peacock out, making sure not to hit my partridge before. I'll end up trimming some of that partridge off maybe, just to even out the the legs or wings or whatever you want to call these. I would think of them, they look more like wings, but the fish probably would think of them as legs. And then I'll just come up here and I can just whip finish this off just really quick. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. And then I won't have a ton of thread buildup. Just get this trimmed off as close as I can. And what I'm going to do for my last little step is I'm going to take just a little bit of bone dry. I don't think this is necessarily going to add durability to this fly. It's just going to add a little bit more. You got to be careful. This brush usually stores a bunch of resin. You just want to make sure it's going to soak in, so I'm going to have to do this kind of quick. It's this is a plenty bright bait. Too bad it doesn't glow in the dark. So I'll let that cure, and that's just going to add a ton more flash to this bait. It's going to add, again, not necessarily durability, but you can see even in the camera that it just makes it super flashy, kind of like a little hotspot. So I did get a little bit of that Peacock in there, but that's fine. So again, just a little nymph, some biot tails, vinyl rib. So I tied a couple of these up. There's a little bit of a difference in this one. This one has some thinner wings, and I ended up using, instead of the green, I used olive vinyl rib. So it's just a little bit of a different bait. And I just I'm honing in on, I just always end up grabbing browns and grays and blacks and stuff like that just to tie natural looking stuff. But every once in a while, it's nice to get out there and have something just obnoxiously bright. And this is small enough still where I'm not too worried about it being too obnoxious. But there you have it. Little size 12 vinyl Peacock Nymph. I might use this one this weekend. Like and subscribe. Drop some comments below. Stuff you want to see. I'll see you on the next one.